at both stations were mainly persons who knew him personally or people who listened to him on the radio. I didn't meet his lawyers at the police station when I arrived there, but I understand that some attempts had been made yesterday from various individuals to see him, and they had not been successful at that. And so that's what they were still doing. And calls were still being made as of this morning, just about 6:10 a.m. thereabout, to try and contact individuals and also to interact with him as well by those who had come over to speak to him.
Now, he was taken straight to the Nima police station, but there have been some suggestion from onlookers at the time of his arrest that those who arrested him did not identify themselves as police, but as national security operatives. Were you able to learn anything further about that? The circumstances of his arrest?
In fact, that is the same information that those who were present or claimed to be present at the point where he was arrested, they've also repeated that same allegation. They have also raised concerns about the manner in which he was whisked away, about the number of men that had come in, and all of that. But all those are matters that we've not been able to independently confirm. But it's the story that they are putting out there, and so it still remains to be seen whether the police statements will confirm all of that.
We really appreciate you for this, Joseph Akable, of course, from the Joy Newsroom. Okay, so let's see what else we can learn. We're joined by Samson Lade Anyenini, who's a Ghanaian lawyer. He is also the host of Newsfile here on Joy FM and the Joy News channel, and he is the current reigning GJA Journalist of the Year. We're also joined by Suleimana Brima, who heads the Media Foundation for West Africa. Mr. Brima, it's been a long time. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Kajo. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Okay, Samson, if you don't mind, we'd like to start with you. The police have issued a statement now. The suggestion here is that he has been arrested in connection with an alleged case of publication of false news and offensive conduct. Now, the third paragraph of the police Facebook post says his arrest became necessary after he turned down several invitations from the police to him and others involved in the case to assist with investigation. So the police are saying that it became necessary to arrest him after he turned down invitations. From the perspective of the law, if I turn down an invitation of the police, can that result in my arrest?
Right. Could you now, in the course of January and February, I've been in court on a number of occasions, all defending and fighting for journalists. But this morning in this conversation, I'll disappoint a lot of you journalists because of what I know is very disturbing, including outright criminal activity in the name of journalism. Journalists are human beings like anybody else. There are journalists who are thieves, and if they are caught, it should not be a question of human rights being abused. Now, if the police throws an invitation to you because they have a reasonable suspicion, that's what the law says, that once the police have a suspicion on reasonable grounds that you have either committed an offense, you are about, or the offense is being committed, and they need to prevent the commission of that offense, that you are in a particular building, and whatever it is you are doing, they have a suspicion which is reasonable that it is an offense. The police have a right to cause your arrest, and they do not need to have a warrant to do so. And I state that because there's a lot of ignorance within the public, regardless of how many times we give the education. There are people who, start shouting when a police touches them that, where is your warrant? You can't arrest me without a warrant. I'm sorry, that's not how the law says. Now, when they give you an invitation, they're actually giving you some respect. And to be frank with you, those of us who have been receiving invitation from the police, you will discover that there's a certain discrimination that anybody can make in a court of law, that the police ought not be doing that, because they don't do that across the board. They do that for people like Kojo. You had an invitation. I went with you recently, last week, and a week before. Unfortunately, it was on a very flimsy, useless, and baseless claim that we may deal with at another time. And the police saw within a very short time of our second attendance, they questioned the lady involved about what she claims you said. And she admitted that you never said the things she claims in her, public utterances that you have said. She admitted it in the face of many people. Now, this lady has been going around and being entertained by media persons who do throw caution to the wind and just listen to her. And because she's speaking, they feel it's okay, and they don't think about their responsibility as well. And in the course of things, we'll talk about media managers and media owners who are also being irresponsible in this regard. Now, so for me, many times I have had to advise a client that don't attend to the invitation, rather wait to be arrested. So if they threw an invitation to him, they were somewhat doing him a favor that the millions of Ghanaians don't get. And if he decided not to respond to it, he had every right not to honor the invitation. He may have also been advised by his lawyers that instead of attending the invitation, which often is turned into an arrest, it is better to be arrested so that you can activate your rights. Because when you are invited, you cannot, so to speak, activate your rights because you are not under arrest. But once you are said to be arrested, then you can activate your rights and demand that you be treated the way the law says someone who is arrested, detained, be treated. So if they invited him and they decided that he was not attending, it was within his right to reject the invitation, and it is within the right of the police, once they had a reasonable suspicion that he was doing something that is unlawful, that is a criminal, to proceed and arrest him. It doesn't matter if you are being arrested whilst you're asleep, deep in the night. It doesn't matter that you are in a church room. If that is the place that the investigative authorities deem is the appropriate time they can get you, it's within the law.
Right. Just before we bring Suleimana in, perhaps some further education, Samson. The police indicate in their post that this arrest is in connection with an alleged case of publication of false news and offensive conduct. Can you briefly...
Right, so publication of false news at Section 208 of the Criminal Offences Act. Let me just open it. So Section 208 of the Criminal Offences Act says, it's titled Publication of False News. It says, a person who publishes or reproduces a statement, rumor, or report which is likely to cause fear and alarm to the public or to disturb the public peace, knowing or having reason to believe that the statement, rumor, or report is false, commits a misdemeanor, meaning you could go into jail for 3 years, maximum 3 years. Of course, you could also be fined and so on. Then subsection 2 says, it is not a defense to a charge under subsection 1 that the person charged did not know or did not have reason to believe that the statement, rumor, or report was false, unless it is proved that prior to the publication, that person took reasonable measures to verify the accuracy of the statement, rumor, or report. What I need to say here is that the offense is not committed merely by publication of false news. That's not when the offense is committed. The ingredients that are required for the offense to be committed, of course, begin with publication or reproduction of what? Of false information. But most importantly, that publication of that false information should be likely, that's where the whole thing begins, should be likely to cause fear and alarm to the public, or it should be likely to disturb the public peace. These two, if they happen to a publication of false information, then the offense will be deemed to have been committed. And there will be a check to see whether or not you had knowledge of the falsity. Because if you had knowledge of the falsity, that is worse for you. And you had reason also to believe in the falseness of the news that or information that you have put up. Unfortunately, the clause 2 says it is not a defense if you are arrested, if you say that you did not know of the falsity of it, or that you did not have reason to believe that it was false. Now, if you make that claim, then you must move a step further to show proof of reasonable measures that you took to verify the accuracy of the information prior to the publication. This is the basic journalistic, responsibility of any journalist. So it should not even be stated by a law.
Thank you for these. We'll talk about offensive conduct later, but I'd like to bring in Sulemana Brima of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Mr. Brima, this is the third journalist to be arrested in less than 2 months. There are some who consider this to be a source of worry. Does the Media Foundation feel the same way, or do you consider these to be actually the proper execution of our justice proceedings in each of these three cases?
Well, Kojo, thank you very much. I would want to start by saying that perhaps in line with what Samson has said, I'm also increasingly getting worried by the state of reckless conduct by persons who sit behind microphones and consoles, and persons who generally would be referred to as journalists by virtue of what they do in terms of communicating via the mass media. And I am getting worried because in the course of fighting for press freedom as guaranteed by our Constitution, one of the biggest threats to undermining press freedom is recklessness on the part of the people who must act in ways that would imbue public confidence. And I'm talking here about journalists. Now, having said that, I think it's important for us to also make the point that the framers of our Constitution knew very well that because media practitioners are human beings, there are likely going to be instances of infractions here and there. And, of course, there used to be criminal libel law that could be applied. Of course, the publication of false news law still exists, even though at some point there were efforts to also get it repealed because of concerns that, look, it could be applied in the same fashion as, criminal libel law was applied, even though being called a different name. And it is because of the recognition of this that there was an attempt to establish what we should see as a media regulatory institution. In our context, that should be the National Media Commission. And even as the Constitution doesn't clothe the Commission with absolute powers to sanction, there is a provision that says that the Media Commission from time to time may make legislation to ensure that it is able to discharge its mandate, efficiently. I think that, as I said, I'm getting worried about the state of recklessness in our media. It is also because we have, over the years, simply had an institution that on paper is supposed to be our media regulator, but in practice has literally been, for a lack of a better word, useless. Now, having said that, Kojo, I think we must also not belittle the fact that when acts become too rampant, then of course we must pay attention and subject it to scrutiny. As you have said, a number of journalists have been arrested. People have called me over the last 1 week to say, we haven't heard your voice. We haven't heard the Media Foundation issue a statement. People have criticized us as being hypocritical. We are on one side of the political divide, and so on and so forth. But as Samson said, crime is crime. It doesn't matter who committed it. It doesn't matter where it is committed. If you sit on radio and you commit a crime, you cannot run under the cover of press freedom and say, look, I have immunity because I committed this crime on radio. I think that some of the cases in relation to persons who have been arrested relates to crime. So for example, if somebody who is a journalist is said to have extorted money from someone, and the person is facing prosecution or the person is arrested for that offense, the fact that the person is known to be a journalist is a different matter. I don't think that it's something that we would say relates to press freedom. However, we have witnessed the arrest, in fact, not the arrest, the ambush of someone like David Tamaklo of the WhatsApp News. And the claim was that, in fact, the charge was that he had published false information. Ultimately, we all got to know that it was a claim of false publication over something that had not actually been published. But that a subject matter of investigations by a journalist has actually reached out to the police and made a claim that a journalist is going to publish something about me, which I think it is not true, and therefore I want you to act. And the police acted. I think that was quite problematic. I have seen a letter from the Cantonment Divisional Command to the management of Class Media Group. And I think Accra FM is part of that group. And this letter is dated January 31, in which I think it is the divisional crime officer who signed the letter indicating that they are investigating an issue of false publication in relation to a claim made by Bobie on his program that Her Excellency the First Lady had acquired some properties at the AU village and, doing whatever and so on, and they are investigating that, and they were then requesting for the videos and audios of what the kinds of things that were said on the program. I'm not sure whether this particular arrest relates to that incident, but if it is, one begins to wonder, at what point should somebody act on the basis of defamation, and at what point should somebody act on the basis of publication of false news against a journalist? So what I'm saying is there is so much recklessness in our media today. Our media regulatory institution has been dormant and ineffective, and to that extent, the mechanism of self-regulation or other ways of regulating the media without, these kinds of police and security arrests and so on and so forth has been absent. But we are also witnessing a rate of arrests on the basis of false news that is becoming quite alarming. And I say so because this particular provision of our Constitution has been there. When the criminal libel law was being repealed in 2001, this was there. In fact, I remember when I joined the foundation in 2010, 2011, there were a series of meetings with lawyers to try and dialogue whether we should activate a process to also get this particular provision repealed because it was considered quite problematic. And if you have a government that wants to abuse the process, they can always use it to harass journalists and so on and so forth. And we haven't seen that law or provision being used as much as we are seeing today. I am not therefore saying if a law was there and people were committing crime and the law was not being used, it was okay, and therefore if it is being used now, it is bad. But I think that we need to pay attention to how frequent this particular provision on publication of false news is being used.
While we're on the topic, just because there are 3 examples of arrests that we are referring to, one being Captain Smart, the second one is Nana Jetia, I believe his name is, in the western region. He reports that he was set upon by police officers who were arresting some people at a popular eatery. He started to film the police while they were doing these arrests, and they set upon him, beat him up, arrested him, took him to the police station, and his employers had to come and bail him out. There we have a very different process here. There was no matter of invitation. In fact, we don't even know what crime this journalist was charged with. What's the Media Foundation's take on that?
Well, Kojo, I think that we have said time and again that increasingly the government of President Akufo-Addo is proving to be, perhaps in the Fourth Republic, one that is becoming too oppressive against the media. And we've often cited examples of incidents that have happened. We can recall the ambush of Modern Ghana officers and the arrest of Ajafor and Co. in a very Rambo style. We can recall the recent incident, as I mentioned, about the WhatsApp news guy. Not too long ago, a journalist in Asankregwa was brutalized to, almost to his death. And as I speak to you, this journalist is still struggling to have his hearing restored. And this was a journalist who had simply gone to a scene to ask questions about what was happening, because operatives from national security had stormed a particular facility and a scene had been created. And of course, as a journalist, he was eager to get information out there. And national security people pounced on him, brutalized him almost to his death. Then, of course, we have this Connect FM incident, and there are several others which perhaps are minor incidents in terms of the gravity of violation. But nonetheless, all those things constitute grounds, for one to be concerned. Now, it is not only when state actors are the ones who perpetrate the crime. Even as we know that close to 70 individual incidents that we have recorded over the last 4 years have been mostly perpetrated by security agents, the kind of environment that is created within a regime is also critical when assessing, the media freedom landscape. Just about a month ago or so, we know about the attack on Radio Adan, which is one of the most prominent and I would say one of the most professional radio stations that we have in the country. Of course, investigations are still ongoing, but we know that this station has been very critical of a particular activity in the community. And certainly we believe it's the reason why the station was stormed. And there are several other instances where media people, media organizations have been brutalized. Because don't forget that not too long ago, the NCA took a decision to shut down mainly opposition-aligned media organizations. We know very well that the reasons why these stations were shut down, other stations were in the same kind of situation and yet were not shut down. We know when it comes to the publication of false news, I don't think that as a state we should be concerned only when some allegation or some claims of false publication is made in relation to persons in government. I believe that when similar allegations are made, even against people who are not in government, but of course high-ranking in our society, it must be of concern. We have radio stations in this country that have always been spotlighted for their unethical conduct, doing the same things that others are doing, and yet nothing happens as far as practitioners on that station is concerned. And I think that these are the gamut of things that, when put together, gives a concern about the kind of press freedom environment that is being created. Even as we lament about the level of irresponsible conduct, level of recklessness, level of unprofessional conduct in the media, I think there must be a fair playing field. If we want to regulate the media landscape and be strict to ensure professionalism, we must apply it across board, and not only apply it when the conduct of a particular journalist or radio station affects the government or a person in government, and then when the same thing is done against, let's say, opposition elements or other persons in society, we say, well, that one, the law doesn't talk about it. I think those are other areas that we should be concerned about.
Thanks for that. Samson, now that Mr. Brimer has brought up the issue of a letter dated the 31st of January, written by the police, Cantonment's division, to the general manager of the media group that employs Bobie and Class Media Group, I wonder whether perhaps this affects what we discussed earlier regarding the idea of invitation. You made it quite clear. An invitation is really a courtesy. Police doesn't need one. They can simply arrest you if they suspect you of having committed a crime. It's a courtesy. But here, this letter says request for assistance. So in this case, the letter doesn't suggest that Mr. Bobie Ansah is a suspect in a crime. In fact, the letter says, and I quote, "The Cantonment's Divisional Criminal Investigation Department is investigating a case of alleged fraudulent acquisition of government lands at AU Village by Her Excellency Rebecca Akufo-Addo, which was discussed on Citizen Show hosted by Kwabena Bobie Ansah of Accra FM." So Cantonment's police is saying that they are investigating fraudulent acquisition of government lands. So at this point, Mr. Bobie Ansah is not a suspect. He's been invited to give assistance in a case of fraudulent land acquisition. But by the time he's arrested, he's a suspect of publication of false news. Does this how do you
ignore the word assistance in that letter? Because normally that's what they would do. So in my practice, what I do is that, and you can ask the very many journalists that I have had to go to their assistance or rescue, even from police, IOCO, wherever it is. Once the letter comes, there is a provision of the law that says, for example, that IOCO can request, for documents from you or, assistance in some way. Right. And they all use that generally and write a letter and say, we need journalists so and so to assist. We need so and so to assist. Normally, the first thing I do is to find out who is in charge and who is going to be speaking to my clients, and then I'll ask them, is he coming there as a suspect or as someone who indeed is only coming to assist? And if you remember, you and I have had this discussion because of what I referred to earlier. Yeah. And then I will find out, in the end, is it this may be his contribution by way of the assistance you are seeking. In the end, will you be requiring an ordinary statement or a caution statement from the person? Once I know it's an ordinary statement, I know you are not going to be arrested. Once I know it's a caution statement, it means you are a suspect. So you often call and find out and realize that the invitation will be turned to an arrest. So once you establish that, then you prepare yourself, prepare your clients properly, and follow them. So ignore that. That is very much inconsequential.
Okay. Let's talk about the other charge or the other crime that Mr. Ansah is suspected of, and that is offensive conduct. Yeah. Some elements you can help us with?
Yeah, offensive conduct simply in section 207 of the Criminal Offences Act. And once again, I read it. It's headed offensive conduct conducive to breaches of the peace.
Right.
A person who in a public place, that's what you underline. A person who in a public place. So if you are in the privacy of your home, you can say whatever you want to say. It will not amount to crime. A person who in a public place or at any public meeting uses threatening, abusive, or insulting words or behavior, but it doesn't end there. With intent, there must be an intention. And what is the intention for? With intent to provoke a breach of the peace. So you are doing something and it's clearly seen that what you are doing is inviting or provoking a breach of the peace. You are calling people, as it were, to come together to do something that is unlawful and so on. With intent to provoke a breach of the peace, or by which a breach of the peace is likely. Not that it has happened though. In these two crimes, offenses, it is the likelihood. It doesn't actually talk about the actual thing that it has happened. We know one situation where somebody has sent a text message to say that there will be an earthquake in parts of the country, and then people lost their sleep and woke up to try and go and stand at places. I mean, that one is beyond likely. So likely to be occasioned, if you do these things, you have committed an offense. Again, it's a misdemeanor, which means you are looking to a maximum of 3 years. Now, threat itself, threat of harm, threat of death, that you say to another person, it's an offense and it's punishable under our law. Abusive or insulting words or behavior. So if you engage in abusive or insulting words or behavior and there is an intention and you are doing so in a public place and the intention is to call people to misconduct themselves in a manner that is criminal. You are inviting people to beat up somebody, and so on, ransack a shop, what we call instant justice. It's actually instant injustice that is being meted out to people. The things we have heard some of the politicians justify that their supporters are protecting public property by after the election is declared and they have won, they have the right to organize other people to go burn stuff around the place, as it were, take over toilets and the rest of them. You are using abusive words. You are doing things and behavior that is with an intention, and you are doing it in a public place, and the intention is to provoke a breach of the peace or a likely breach of it, and you will be caught by that as well. So we have to examine what exactly did he do. They say fraudulent acquisition of or something land you just mentioned in the letter. So yes, we need to find out what exactly did this journalist do, and with the evidence, with the facts, then we'll be able to make some commentary. Of course, mindful of the fact that he's not been put before a court yet, so the question of contempt really does not come up immediately. And you mentioned other journalists who have been picked up. Of course, we have at various times, decried, denounced, and call on the government more particularly to ensure that the safety of journalists is assured. The freedoms that we enjoy are not, as it were, compromised and undermined. To be frank with you, in this regime, unfortunately under the headship of someone we have known to be a champion of human rights and the rest of them, we have seen such egregious, abuses that have happened. We have seen situations where, as a lawyer, I can tell you for a fact that you are doing helping a journalist or a media entity who clearly the state has come against. I mean, the politicians have used the powers of state to come against, and you are such a small, thing. It's difficult for you to fight effectively sometimes. But let's be frank about it, that in some of the cases that we have seen, and I will agree with Sule, and Sule doesn't mention to you that they have been doing this monitoring and they have produced the results of the clear infractions by some of the media entities. And go and check. Most of them, and the journalists, are those that have politicians supporting them, even when they have done clear criminal offense. And the politicians will go to their support. And so they feel emboldened. I don't know what kind of journalism is that. Journalism that looks to, a politician's support, to give you the oil to function. That is very terrible. And we should not entertain that. No, you see, so they have done reports. They have invited me and others. We have gone to discuss these reports, clear abuses. They have told managers of these stations. They have sent the reports to these individual journalists. One of them is the one who is now in the cooler for contempt of court. Please, let's examine the statement that gentleman made and ask ourselves, why should anybody, and look at the statement the station issued and said that they are not perturbed, they are not demoralized by what is going on, and finding all sort of useless and baseless grounds to even embolden this person further, where you will expect that there will be a responsible media owner or editors. When I was editor, you can't do half of these things under my watch and expect to survive in my newsroom. I mean, these things that happen, let's be clear about them. The excesses, particularly being championed on social media and by partisan political activists who are pretending to be journalists. We should be clear about that. The Connect FM guy, producer, well, I have given the education over and again, and we have gone to court and secured a judgment in favor of Efia Pokua and the rest of them that says that the journalist in a public place has a right to take photographs. They will take the images or make the recordings once the event or the action is in the public place. And in fact, if it concerns public officers, there is even the public interest. Public officers who are doing wrong, the journalist must capture it. But why was this journalist hiding and seeking to take a photograph of these police officers who were at the eatery with a suspect? Did they find out the circumstances for which they were there with the suspect, rather than proceed to make commentary that suggests that the police officers were compromising the justice system or that they were doing something untoward? Is it possible that they were holding this person, taking the person to the eatery because there was somebody that he needed to identify, as part of a suspect? Is it possible that that particular place is a scene that they needed him to identify certain things because that scene is part of the crime scene? Whatever it is, I think that a journalist ought to be bold and approach the individuals, ask questions. Of course, the lawyers, the courts have said that we must take straightforward means in compliance with the GJA Code of Ethics to gather information. Yeah. But where we find that we are being frustrated, where we find that it is impossible, we can use, as Kokubaku would say, often subterfuge to gather the information. But we do all of that at our own risk. But that risk does not include anybody, and a police officer for that matter, beating the journalist. That is an assault, and that is a criminal offense. So the IGP says that, yes, he's taking over, he will do something. Yes, take over and do the internal discipline, but let this police officer or officers be before the court as swiftly as possible, facing charges for criminal assault.
Thank you, Samson. I think we have literally 1 minute left. Mr. Brima, if you can tell us what your expectations are going forward regarding this case and perhaps the other two that are on the public burner at the moment.
Well, I think that all the actors within the media sphere probably need to come together, have a big conversation about what is happening. As regards the experts in our media space, I think the national media is doing to perform the function that it is supposed to be performing. I think media owners have a responsibility to ensure that their journalists and presenters on the platform conduct themselves properly. But at the same time, I think that the government and state agencies must also begin to act in accordance with the law and do so fairly and equitably. That is the only way people will have confidence in the judicial and criminal system. And it is only when we as journalists conduct ourselves so well that the public will have trust and confidence in us and will always rise up to support us when we open forward. I think we have a long way to go, but we must stop now.
I want to thank you and, of course, Samson Ladia Nyenini for your time with us this morning. We appreciate the education and the insights.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Coffee in your cup and Joy on the set. The Super Morning Show is always the best. On Joy 99.7 FM.
La 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 la, miensa mienu bako freedom. La 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 la, so a piece of fake kawanutum.
Oh my this year, Michiamo, Execution FM, no masuguso. No see a cassia bomb me de pedamo, so for good, de cassia boy pedamo. In some you draw so, my bonnet offer, the edu who are cutting the sooner midi betuja. Your surprise be away your telephone, latest track pona, mid I am a ringtone. A jam more quaba by Fidio, FMU wants be a pesse yebisao. A young Crawford, Africa, Sammy Sam, never can saying, or Bravo or Ghana. Ebi musi yate wonka ewa America campaign trail Uno Obama eyampa
Unse bayeno first law repeal here and the criminal libel law and now for baby I say FM station obi akana dune make NDC forward stations no bebre cha yankura some mu kan na kontom ponko a won mu form freedom no nya papa won mu kan ko but you say se liba want nya freedom na kan la dune na e kwan bi so no I need to remove the criminal libel law. Let the people feel free, let them think free, and let them talk freely. And that's what happened. Truly you are a free nation. Now, a free man is the best factor for production.
And so you know, false propaganda, nipa bone for Taliban, ne Akaida, Wakanchi, Nancy, Mintina Wakanti, and Yamunya Dad, and a pen a mobile fiat, Metiasi. A pen a Mibay, you will see the moment be Philly live on your TV, or brought for Matipaka and Miri with your Bayam with such in. Okay, Brock and Yinina Swanson. I'm out for your Kojin Kratwaba.
By the time I was elected president, I think that I established my credentials as a champion for individual freedom and press freedom in particular. So what do I make of the current accusations that are being made? The freedoms are under attack under the Kufuor government. I believe in it. It is part of my makeup. And when it comes to the freedom of the press, I am certain I have nothing to apologize for with reference to anything I have ever done or said. The Right to Information Act has been passed under my presidency and is now in operation despite successive governments shying away from it. That is how rights and freedoms are best protected. Having said that, I must also acknowledge that, as our elders say, it is the person wearing the shoes that is able to say exactly where it pinches. Therefore, I should listen when it is suggested that journalists are under attack under my government. It remains a matter of great regret to me. The murder of Ahmed Swale has still not been resolved. But believe me, this is not for want of commitment on the part of the police. And I couldn't have made it any clearer that government has no interest in covering up whatever might be or whoever might be involved. Let me end by addressing a particular line of the current argument being made about the threat to rights and freedoms. I believe this has led to a new definition of a culture of silence. And for me personally, I find it ironic that the presidency of a man who has been and continues to be daily the most vilified political figure of his generation can be accused of presiding over a culture of silence. There's no midnight knock on the door in Ghana for authors of dissenting views, nor will there be during my presidency.
It's Friday! Coffee in your cup